can see you. Does it sound good? You're listening to one talk or 6 talks at the same time? One talk. Amazing, amazing. It's great to be here in Austin. This is really fun. Has anyone ever done like silent disco, those dance parties where you switch between channels? This is kind of like that, except for public speaking. It's like instead of listening to Beyonce, you're listening to Smiley. So I guess that's okay. Unless you're a really big Beyonce fan, I apologize. I'm very excited to talk to all of you today about my favorite topic, purpose in the workplace, how we can engage the talent of the future, the next generation, and really create a space for everyone to thrive at work. By a show of hands, how many of you ever heard of the term quarter-life crisis? Or ever had one of those at some point in your life? Yeah? If you're over the age of 30 like I am, maybe more like a third-life crisis or a midlife crisis? Yeah, my mom is 67. She thinks she's having a quarter-life crisis. So if you had your hand raised, you are not alone. Let me repeat that. You are not alone. The truth is that 70% of Americans are disengaged with their jobs. 70%. 1/5 of those people are so disengaged, they're actively undermining their coworkers' work. They're really getting paid by the organization they work for to screw things up for that organization. I think this should be a concern to those of you in the room that are supervisors and managers, because it means there's people on your team that probably shouldn't be there. But I actually think it should be a concern to all of us, because it means that millions of people are waking up every day unhappy, unfulfilled, sometimes depressed, not showing up fully for themselves, their families, their communities, their teams, or the world at large. Think about the positive impact those people could be having on their organization and the world if they're actually doing meaningful work, if they were actually doing something they truly cared about. Now, this statistic means a lot to me because a few years ago, I was one of those 70%. At the time, I was living in Washington, D.C., working a job for the U.S. federal government, for the U.S. Peace Corps, tremendous organization. And on paper, everything was perfect. I had a great job, I had a good salary, I had health care, I had benefits, I had job security. You literally cannot get fired from working for the United States federal government. Trust me, maybe there are a few people who probably should, right? And I'd go to happy hour and tell everyone my job title. I'm the special assistant to the director of global operations at the U.S. Peace Corps. And they're like, oh my God, that's so cool. Let me get your business card. My boss was impressed. My parents were impressed. My friends were impressed. Everything was perfect about my job, except for one tiny, pretty important thing. I was miserable. How did I know I was miserable? Every single morning when my alarm clock would go off at 6 in the morning, I'd feel a shooting pain go up and down my back. I felt it when I got out of bed, when I brushed my teeth, when I put on my suit and tie, when I left the house, when I took the bus down 16th Street to work, when I scanned my ID badge at the office, when I rode the elevator up to the 8th floor, when I was sitting at my desk typing memos, when we were in meetings talking about best practices, when my boss would email me every single night on my BlackBerry at 10 p.m. We used BlackBerries back then. And then again at 4 in the morning. The pain was so bad it actually turned into shingles on my side. Shingles is gross. Shingles is a nerve disease often related to stress, common among people over the age of 70, not 20-somethings. And I was spending a lot of time in this period, like many young people, on Facebook, overdosing on FOMO, fear of missing out, worried about what my friends were doing. So there was my friend that was off to go to business school, and I was like, maybe I should go get my MBA. There was a friend becoming a teacher. Maybe I should become a teacher. There was a friend, she was opening her own food truck, and I was like, yeah, maybe I should open up a food truck, even though I'm a pretty bad chef and like the world's worst driver. Like, don't ever get in a car with me, it's a bad idea. And I saw a photo of a buddy of mine from college, saw a photo of him on Facebook. He had already graduated from one of the top law schools in the country, got a job at this amazing corporate law firm in New York City, was making well over 6 figures, had this penthouse apartment in New York City, and I saw a photo of him on Facebook, and he's traveling with his girlfriend in Peru, proposing at sunset in front of Machu Picchu. And I'm like, man, like this guy, like he's got it all figured out, he's got this amazing job, he's making all this money, he's getting married, like I hate my job, I hate my life, like I can't even get a date on OkCupid or Tinder, my life is ruined. I'm never gonna make it. I'm a goner. And it was actually only when I got off Facebook and met other young people going through the exact same thing I was that I was able to turn this quarter-life crisis into a breakthrough and find meaningful work. So today I'm just going to teach you a few lessons I learned on my journey, can help you think about not just engaging millennials that you work with, and not just engaging the next generation, but engaging everyone you work with. This is about creating an organization and a team where everyone feels like they can thrive, where everyone can show up as themselves. So the first lesson I learned on my journey, you have to find believers. You have to surround yourself with people that believe in the beauty of your dreams. Because when I was back in DC, I used to come home every night to my roommate, Dan. I'd be like, Dan, I don't like my job. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to work for the federal government anymore. I want to make a change. I want to move to California. I've always wanted to live in the Bay Area. I want to become a writer. I want to start supporting young people going after their dreams, social entrepreneurs that are really making a difference. I want to switch it up. And Dan would kind of look at me, roll his eyes, take a swig of beer, take another swig of beer, and say, Smiley, suck it up, man. Everyone hates their job. It's part of life. I was like, suck it up. Like, I was 28 at the time, which is old, but not like that old, right? I really want to spend the next 20, 30, 40 years of my life depressed, right? But the truth is, the majority of the world thinks like Dan, right? That's why 70% of Americans are disengaged with their jobs, because 70% of people are like, you know what? It's your job. You're not supposed to like it. Get paid, get a paycheck, go have a beer, go to happy hour, got the weekend, woohoo, do it again on Monday, right? And then I met believers. I went to this program called Starting Block. The Starting Block Institute for Social Innovation brings together young people that are interested in using business for good, that are interested in social change. And at Starting Block, I met believers. I met people like Debbie. Debbie was starting Goldie Blocks, which is a toy company that teaches young girls to become engineers. She was one of the only female engineering students when she was at Stanford, and she saw that all of the toys that teach spatial recognition and engineering skills are designed and geared for the way boys learn, right? Think about it, Thomas the Tank Engine, Bob the Builder, Legos, right? And that all the toys geared to girls are the pink aisle, right? Barbie dolls and just dolls. And she was like, I want to create a toy, design a toy for the way girls learn, right? So she created this toy Goldie Blocks. I met people like Ted, who started MoneyThink, which is a nonprofit in Chicago that teaches financial literacy and entrepreneurship to urban youth. I met people like Tom, who started Rising Tide Car Wash, which is a for-profit small business in South Florida that employs people with autism. So I met people like Debbie and Ted and Tom, and they were like, wait a second, Smiley, wait a second. Like, you want to move across the country? You want to move to California? You want to become a writer? You want to start supporting young people? Like, you have to do that. If you don't do that, who the hell's going to do it? Right? A crazy thing happens when you find believers, you also find accountability. Now, normally you tell someone you're going to write a book, you tell someone you're going to start a business, you tell someone you're going to start a new project at work or switch things up. They're like, yeah, you said that last week. You'll never do it. See you at happy hour. Everyone's writing a book, right? Not when you tell believers, because I told my friend Evan at this program that I was going to quit my job, move across the country, and start writing, and this guy asked me one simple question. When? When are you going to have the talk with your boss? And he texted me every single week after that program, Smiley, have you had the talk with your boss yet? Have you had the talk with your boss yet? Have you had the talk with your boss yet? Have you had the talk with your boss yet? I'd be in meetings with senior government officials at the White House getting calls and texts from Evan, hey, Smiley, have you had the talk with your boss? I was like, dude, you got to stop calling me like the Secret Service is going to come after me or something. But you know what? The only reason I did end up having that talk, move 3,000 miles across the country, write 2 books, and the only reason I'm standing on stage with all of you today is because people like Evan held me accountable. Because when you find believers, you find accountability. Now, people like Debbie and Ted and Tom, they were not talking about making lots of money. They were not talking about getting promoted or rising up the corporate ladder. Nope. They weren't talking about getting featured in Fast Company or the Wall Street Journal, USA Today, New York Times. No. They were talking about how to use their skills, their access, their privilege to empower others less fortunate than them. They were talking about making the world more innovative, more compassionate, more sustainable. So no matter how much we hear on social media and stereotypes, oh, millennials, they're just the me generation, the entitled generation, the lazy generation, the selfie generation. That last one is quite accurate. Millennials take a lot of selfies. But most of those, I think, those stereotypes couldn't be further from the truth. The truth is that the majority of millennials would take a pay cut to find work that matches their values. They turn down money to do work they actually care about. Doesn't mean they don't want any money, but they would turn down money to do work they care about. 90% want to use their skills for good. According to Deloitte, 75% of millennials think the business world is getting it wrong, that businesses are too focused on their own agenda, profit, and not focused enough on improving society. So despite unprecedented levels of student debt and unemployment, this is a generation that wants to work with purpose. So great, everyone wants meaningful work. That's why we're here. What does this mean? Well, the next lesson I learned is that you have to stop comparing yourself to others and start pursuing what's meaningful to you. Because I went back and I interviewed my friend, the baller corporate lawyer. Remember him? I was like, man, you got it all figured out. You got this sweet job. You're making all this money. You got the penthouse apartment in New York City. You're married. Like, what's your secret? What am I doing wrong? And you know what he told me? After 3 years of law school, landing a job at one of the top corporate law firms in the world, he was miserable in his job as a corporate lawyer. He was still happily married, but he was miserable in his job as a corporate lawyer, and that he was going to go back to graduate school at the age of 30 to become a high school social studies teacher, history teacher, which is great for him, but what's the lesson there? The grass is always greener, right? We think, especially for young people who see their highlight reels of all their friends, we think everyone has it figured out. Everyone's searching, right? Stop comparing yourself to others. Start figuring out why you're here. Not your friends on Facebook or Instagram, not your coworkers, not your boss, not your parents, not your siblings. Why are you here? What do you care about? And I came across this amazing book called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Has anyone read this book? Excellent book. I think it should be required reading. It's one of the best-selling books of all time by a man named Viktor Frankl. Who is Viktor Frankl? He was a psychiatrist who survived the Holocaust. He was from Austria. He survived living in a Nazi concentration camp during pretty much everyone around him was being killed, right? Including his friends, including his family, including his own wife who is pregnant. And he wrote a book about about observing what it was like for people to go on in the face of almost certain death. If you weren't going to die next week, you'd die in 2 weeks or in a month. And he writes in this book that being human always points and is directed to something or someone other than oneself. The more one forgets himself by giving himself to a cause to serve or another person to love, the more human he is. So that meaning comes not from what we've been taught by society, accumulating wealth and status and power, no, but from giving it away, from love, from service, from compassion. And I'm not saying I don't think this means that we're all going to quit our jobs and go work in the developing world or work for a church or a charity. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying I think it means we have to approach our day-to-day work, the people we manage, the programs and policies we provide from a point of service, from sharing our gifts with the world and letting everyone show up as their full, authentic self. And the framework that I came up for my book with meaningful work, right, it's a very abstract concept, very hard to define something like meaning, happiness, fulfillment, but these similar themes kept coming up. That meaningful work reflects who you are. Again, not your best friends, what your interests are, allows you to share your gifts to help others, provides a community of believers that will support your dreams, and is financially viable given your desired lifestyle. And I think this last piece is incredibly important for millennials. We're talking about meaningful work, not how to take a meaningful vacation, right? It has to be financially viable. And for those of you that are more visual learners, I think this is about alignment. How can you align both your own and the people around you, your team, the people you supervise, to allow them the ability to align their unique gifts with the impact they're trying to have on the world, surround themselves with the right types of people, both at work and outside of work, and live their desired quality of life. And the cool thing about alignment is that if we were all fill out this alignment Venn diagram right now, I guarantee you we'd have several hundred different definitions, several hundred different diagrams, because we're all very different, right? We all have very unique gifts. Some of us are great with numbers and accounting and math. Some of us are great project managers. Some of us are great with communications and public speaking and writing or design or social media or analytics, event planning, whatever it is. We're all trying to make different impacts locally, globally, surround ourselves with different people, and we have different standards for what quality of life means to us, right? Some of us are actually trying to see our families and our children every night for dinner. Some of us are trying to exercise, not just on the weekend. Now, Debbie, she started Goldie Blocks because of the discrimination that she faced as one of the only female engineering students when she was at Stanford. Ted started MoneyThink in Chicago because when he was growing up in Chicago, he realized he had a lot of opportunities that his friends in Chicago did not have. And Tom started Rising Tide Car Wash because he saw how difficult it was for his own brother to get a job because his own brother has autism. So they had a deeply personal connection to their work because meaning is personal. And if we zoom out a little bit, okay, what does this mean for how do we engage the next generation of talent? How do we engage our workforce? Some interesting trends emerge. This is data from Gallup in terms of what millennials are really looking for. When we get past kind of the stereotypes, not just the paycheck, right? Not just about the job title or the JD, the job description, the position description, the LinkedIn one-liner, right? Not the boxes they're checking, this sense of purpose, that you're showing up every day and you truly know how the work you do every day, the work you're doing on Monday morning, contributes to the team's work, to the organizational level, and to the world. Like, what impact is it having on others? And that I can see that. They have a sense of purpose. They truly know why they're there and what they're doing and how it all connects. Not just job satisfaction, personal development. I think this is an important shift between generations. Notice that that doesn't say professional development. I think traditionally we've expected the workplace to provide mostly professional development, right? Skills-based learning, becoming better at your job, right? Getting promoted, having new opportunities. This says personal development. So there's this sense now that the workplace is making you a better adult, a better whole person, a better human, a better communicator, right? A better coach, a better leader. And I think that a lot of young people are not getting that kind of adult-based learning from the outside world, I believe because so many of them have their head in their phones so much of the time and are on social media that they forgot actually just how to be, to grow up. So they're looking for that personal development. No longer just looking for a boss or a supervisor, but a coach, a mentor, someone to guide you through your time at an organization, but also to guide you through life, right? The world is more uncertain, it's more complex. People are looking for someone that's gonna be like, hey, where do you wanna be in a few years? How can I help you get there? Here are books I recommend you reading. Here are podcasts I recommend you listening to. Here are conferences you should check out. When I was your age, here's what I was going through, right? They actually take that kind of, really personal level coaching-like approach where they sit down and say, hey, what's going on for you? Right? They know what's going on with their person inside and outside of work. They know if they're sick. They know if they haven't been showing up fully. They know if something's up with their family. They know if they just went on vacation, these types of things. Getting rid of this idea of the annual review to much more frequent feedback loops, right? The average young person, frankly, the average person of any age doesn't remember now what happened 2 weeks ago, right? People can't focus. They're doing 50 different things. They got their phone open, 17 tabs on the computer. Right? And so you're going to sit down with someone who's 27 and be like, let's talk about your performance the last 12 months. And they're like, 12 months? I don't even know where I was 3 days ago, right? So you need to have these mechanisms to really frequently check in with people and to be able to provide that kind of ongoing feedback, those ongoing conversations, right? Not just about fixing weaknesses, developing strengths. This is, I think, an area millennials don't do well in. They don't want to talk about what they're not good at. They want to talk about what they're good at. Well, sometimes you're not good at something. You need to get better. Right? And this sense that it's not just your job, it's your life, it's your identity, it's how you present yourself on social media. So the employee experience becomes ever more important because the average person is saying, hey, like, I don't like my job because of this, and I don't feel good, or they don't offer these types of experiences. So they're really kind of considering the job is the life. It's not separate from your life. It is who you are. But enough about millennials. We talk about some of these things like purpose and growth in the workplace and coaching as like millennial things. Everyone wants this stuff, right? Not just millennials. They just get framed as millennial values because millennials currently make up more than 50% of the workforce. Some people say that in the next 10, 15 years, millennials will make up close to 70% of the workforce just because of the demographic shifts. Right? That's an incredible amount. But it's not just about millennials. IBM did a fascinating study several years ago that found that pretty much everyone in the workplace wants pretty much the same things. So we now have 4, and in some cases 5 generations working together at work. We have Gen Z, the youngest generation. That's folks born about after 1997. They're often called iGen, or the smartphone generation. They literally do not know a world without smartphones. So the oldest members of that group are just joining the workforce now. They're 20, 21, 22, and they're going to be coming up in waves, right? They don't know a world without the smartphone, which is incredible. Millennials, which is my generation, that's the generation born about, some people make the cutoff at early 80s up to 97. That's the largest generation. Then you have Gen X, that's born about roughly, Gen X, 1965 to 1980, and then of course baby boomers, who were the largest generation, now being replaced in terms of numbers by millennials. So if you look at everyone across generations, this study found that pretty much people want the same things. Make a positive impact on their organization, solve social and environmental challenges, work with a diverse group of people, work with an organization that's among the best in their industry, do work they care about, and become an expert in their field. So for all the talk about millennials as the trophy generation, right? This is the generation that wants the participation trophy. It's like, I'm here, it's Monday, woohoo! It's like, you're supposed to be here, it's your job, it's Monday, like get to work, right? And there's some reason for this. I played soccer and I played Little League when I was a kid. My Little League team was 0-15, my baseball team was 0-15. We didn't win a game, still got a damn big trophy, right? Right, like woohoo, like I won, it's like we didn't win a game, right? But this study actually found that millennials don't want a trophy, they simply want a manager who is ethical, fair, and transparent. Like who doesn't want a manager who is ethical, fair, and transparent? So for all the stereotypes we hear about millennials, the trophy, these are stereotypes. And when we actually look at the data, we all kind of want the same thing, so let's work together, right? So when you think about engaging your people, this is not just about millennials, this is data across age. This is from the Energy Project and Harvard Business Review. They indicate that there's 4 key areas you want to focus on in terms of employee engagement. Purpose, the single biggest indicator. People who derive meaning from their work are 150% more engaged and 1.3 times as likely to stay with their organization. The single biggest factor in retention is whether someone really feels that their work is meaningful and that they feel like they have a purpose. Being valued by your supervisor, right? So people that feel valued by their supervisor are 70% more engaged. People feel that their supervisor truly sees them, knows who they are, knows if they were out sick, knows if something's a little off, what's going on with you, what's up, hey, you really, really went above and beyond on that last project, I see you, I value. That's a huge indication. Renewal. Employees who take a break every 90 minutes report a 30% higher level of focus. That is to say, employees who leave the office, go outside, sit in the sun, meditate, have a cup of coffee, call their mom, whatever. When they come back, they do much better work. They're more engaged, right? Creating opportunities for renewal, super important. Focus. It is incredibly difficult, not just for young people, for any people to focus on one task at a time. Only 20% of the people in the survey said they could focus on one task at a time at work, but those who could were 50% more engaged. So how can we create incentives in a given day, week, quarter for our people to truly know what the priorities are, right? Obviously, we're constantly juggling multiple things at work, multiple projects, but how can we say, hey, you know what? The priority for today, the priority for this morning is this, priority for this week is this, the priority for this quarter is this, the priority for this year is this. Yes, we have everything else, but these are the clear things I want you to focus on. People are going to do better work. So purpose is cross-generational. I think purpose brings people together. There's a complete disconnect between what employees say is the most important thing to them, which is on the left-hand side of this slide, which is their meaning in the day-to-day work. That's what employees say is the single most important thing in their work, meaning. And what business leaders, the people at the top, the managers, the people running the organization say is the most important thing. Guess what that is on the right-hand side? Their personal reputation for growth and innovation. What's the least important thing to the C-suite, to people at the top? Their employees' personal meaning. Complete disconnect. That needs to shift so that the people at the top understand that the most important thing is their people, is that their people feel seen and heard, that they're purpose-driven, that they're excited to be there, that they know why they're there, what they're working on every day, how it all connects. The average job tenure in the United States and around the world is getting shorter and shorter. The average 20 to 24-year-old is staying at their job just over a year. Millennials are often called the job-hopping generation. There's a reason for that. Millennial turnover costs U.S. companies alone $30 billion a year. Turnover and retention costs is one of the highest costs that many organizations face. It is incredibly costly to hire someone, train them up, and have them leave after 3 months or 6 months. The average 25 to 35-year-old is staying at their job longer, 2.5 to 3 years. But if you look across the workforce, people are staying at their job just about 4 years, right? Which is also really not that long. So we have to figure out what that sweet spot is, that realistic sweet spot is for retention. Because for most situations and most roles, it's not 10, 15, 20 years. It's probably not even 6 or 7 years in most cases. And we have to be realistic about that, because if we expect the average person to come and stay 7 years, we can't be upset when they only stay 3. We don't want them to stay 3 months, but if they stay 3 years and do a great job and they want to help them be on their way, that's kind of the reality of where things are. We need to be set up for success. Only 12% of Gen Zers, again, that's the smartphone generation, and just 30% of millennials expect to stay in their job longer than 5 years. Not many, right? 70% of millennials that are in senior management roles, that is full-time jobs, would consider a short-term contract in place of their full-time job. They'd almost rather have the short-time job. They'd rather have one foot out so they can be thinking about the next thing or try something else. This is challenging because we often need people to work full-time jobs, right? And 65% of today's kids that are in elementary school will end up in jobs that haven't been invented yet. We'll end up in jobs that if we were to know the title right now, we'd be like, I have no idea what that is. Which kind of makes sense, because about 15 years ago when I graduated college, Facebook wasn't even a thing. Didn't even exist yet. It was being invented in a dorm room, right? And think about all the jobs in social media and data analytics that exist now that weren't around just 5-10 years ago. So how are we preparing our employees, our workforce, for this uncertain future? I think we really need to value our talent through coaching and mentorship, right? And really provide that growth. So I encourage people to think of their career not in the traditional career ladder mindset, right? Where you pick a major in college, you get an entry-level job, then you ride the career ladder up to the top, and at some point you retire and you play golf and you're good. It's just no longer applicable or relevant to most people. The average young person is going to have 15, 20, 25 different jobs in their lifetime. That's a lot of time looking for jobs, freaking out with applications, all this. We need a new mindset that encourages flexibility, adaptability, experimentation. So I encourage people to think of their career much more like a lily pad career mindset. Pond of lily pads spread out in all directions. You can try many things. The roots are all connected. That's what's meaningful to you. That's what you care about. But the surface may look very different, right? So I'm not saying, some people look at this slide and say, oh, this guy's Smiley telling everyone to quit their job every 2 weeks. That's not at all what I'm saying. I think that's a good recipe to be broke and unemployed and piss off your employer. But I am saying that 1/4 of this slide, right, 10 or 15 lily pads, might be your time at one organization. Might be your time in one role, but what you're doing on a day-to-day basis looks very different. Right? So you get hired for one function, but then maybe you start an employee resource group. Then maybe you learn to code, or you take a public speaking class or a design thinking class, or you launch a new project, or you go to a conference, or you slightly morph your role into something else because you want to build a different skill, that type of thing. So that the surface looks different on day 5, day 15, day 207. And if you're providing those opportunities for growth, for people to try new things, to learn new things, you're likely going to have people stay longer. And if you don't, if it feels stale, if it feels boring, people are going to walk and find an organization that can provide that, because they want to remain competitive in an uncertain job market. Wouldn't you do the same, right? So that's what we need. We need to move towards this type of model. So this is my mom. That's me. And my mom was a federal employee for her whole career. She worked 35 years at the Veterans Administration, VA, in Boston, Massachusetts, as a nurse practitioner. So all of her patients were folks that had served in Vietnam, in Iraq and Afghanistan, and she did a lot of palliative care, end-of-life care. So really working very closely with people who were sick and vets and their families. A lot of it is with families. She retired several years ago from working government, and she found that she actually loved the job so much that she's gone back now on a volunteer basis to be working in hospice and palliative care a couple times a week, just because she missed the work so much, right? So even though she was kind of quote-unquote done with work and retired, she hopped to a new lily pad where she could keep kind of that meaning and that purpose even after retirement. And I know that that's not the case for everyone, but I think that we're getting to something where people truly care about the people that they work with so much that they want to stay in that space. So how can we always be learning, always be teaching, and really creating this environment where people are able to reinvent their career and try new things and constantly be learning? Managing millennials is nurturing millennials. This is Esther Perel. Is anyone familiar with her work? She's a marriage therapist. I'm quoting a marriage therapist when speaking about millennials, and I think that that's kind of telling, right? Because a lot of times people will be like, man, these millennials, they come into work and they expect me to be their mom. It's like, I'm not your mom, you have a mom, right? I'm not your father, you have a father. This is work, get to work, right? And I get that. And I think that mindset, that attitude makes sense. But I think that if you're able to throw out that olive branch where you're truly seeing a young person and saying, okay, I see that you have a lot of potential. I see that you're mission driven. I see that you want to shake things up and try new things. Not this week. You're not getting promoted because it's your third day, right? You're not getting a raise. You've been here 2 weeks. But I see you, I hear you. I'm going to nurture you and help you grow, right? I'm going to see what it is that you want to accomplish down the line in your career, and I'm going to do my very best. I'm not going to be able to say yes to everything, but I'm going to do my very best to help you get there. And that is my role as someone who is a supervisor or manager and building out a team and a leader. It's a little bit different than, I think, traditional leadership, right? Where you set the vision, everyone should follow. I think it's a little bit now about coaching people along and making sure that they're feeling seen and heard. So in many ways, HR has become the new life coach. Traditionally, in organizations, we have a pretty negative connotation and relationship with HR, right? HR are like the paperwork people. Like, you fill out your paperwork when you start, like when you leave, and if you break the law, basically. Like, you don't really want to spend much time with HR, right? If you think about the way HR is depicted in the media, it's like in the TV show The Office, like, oh, I got to go see Toby in HR. Like, kill me now, Toby. Oh, Toby, you're the worst, right? Not a fun place to be. Now I actually think HR are the cool kids. HR are where it's at. HR are the people. They know who's on the team, who's in the office, who wants to be there, what their dreams are, their aspirations, their passions, their purpose, why they chose to work with you, where they want to be in 6 months or 2 years, and where they want to be when they leave. Yes, they're going to leave, probably sooner than you think, right? And maybe we can create mechanisms where we say, all right, you're going to be here 2 or 3 years or 4 years for this role. There's always going to be functions where we need someone from an institutional knowledge standpoint where we want someone to stay for 8 years or 10 years or 15 years, but that's not every role, let's be honest. There's going to be people that come and say, yeah, we want you to do 3 years, we're going to train you up, we want you to do a great job, and yes, we will help you find the next thing, right? And maybe you come back to us after working somewhere else 2 years, and you're better at your job, or maybe you recommend your best friend for the role, and they're even better at the job than you are, right? But it's a completely different way of thinking about talent, and I think that that's what the world today is asking of us. So increasingly, company culture, organizational culture is everyone's job, not just the head of human resources or the director of talent or the person doing hiring, right? It's everyone's job, right? We used to have this sense, oh yeah, culture, we have our mission statement, it's framed on the wall, like it's in the conference room. Our values, they're on the wall, right? They're in the employee handbook. It's 500 pages, like no one's reading the employee handbook, right? No, culture is a living, breathing document. It changes every time you make a new hire, every time something changes in the organization or you adopt a new policy, every time something shifts in the world, right? This is something that's constantly growing. We need to adapt. The main reason people leave a job is to go to a firm, an organization with a better company culture. I'm sure you've heard the saying, people don't leave their jobs, they leave their managers. They don't leave bad jobs, they leave bad managers. They leave situations where they don't feel seen and heard, where they don't feel like their boss values them, where it's a space where they feel like they can be themselves, where they want to show up in the morning. The experience of working somewhere isn't fun, isn't exciting, isn't dynamic, isn't purpose-driven. They're going to leave. So I think we need to treat culture like a product, right? We treat all these apps, right, like products. We A/B test, we trial our newsletter, Facebook posts, we try all these different things with everything else. Why not with our culture, right? Let's try different programs where we can see if it works. These are our people, these are our employees, and we're just kind of saying, you know what, this is the way we've done things for 10 years, that's how we do it. That's what it says in the handbook, that's what we're doing. No, let's grow, let's adopt, let's try something, and if it doesn't work, we course correct. Let's make sure that our values, that are things that are in that framed piece of paper in the handbook, are actually aligned with the programs, right? Be able to point specifically. So this is a task management company, Asana, that's based in the Bay Area. They're really able to align their values with programs. So we're not just going to talk about inclusion. We're going to be able to tie it to specific metrics around diversity recruitment. We're not just going to talk about open communication. We're going to make sure that our leaders sit in front of their teams on a weekly basis and take questions, right? And say, hey, people can ask questions about anything that's going on right now. We're just going to have an open Q&A, right? They don't just talk about collaboration. They actually have a whole week set aside for people to think about how they can collaborate on each other's projects. They don't just talk about growth. They actually set aside time during the workday for people to receive coaching, right? So if we're going to talk about these values, let's make sure we turn them into programs. So in many ways, work has become the new grad school, right? The average person thinking about grad school is like, well, I could go take on a ton of debt, lose my job, and then maybe not be able to get a job when I graduate grad school. No, right? They're expecting to get that ongoing training and learning from their organization. The employer, in many ways, has become the new educator. So in this most recent study of millennials in 2018 by Deloitte, 70% of the millennials who do stay longer than 5 years say that their organization is a strong provider of education and training. So there is a direct correlation between retention and investing in education, right? Whether that's online courses, in-person experiences, allowing people to go to conferences, or just really investing in your people, they're more likely to stay longer. This study also found that what the next generation was lacking in many ways, were soft skills, interpersonal skills, confidence, ethics, critical thinking. These are things that I think you just used to learn when you became an adult, right? The real world kind of just taught you these things. And my philosophy, I believe that now, because young people are so focused on their phone and Snapchat, that they forgot actually how to be a normal person in society, right? So they don't know how to have face-to-face conversation. They don't know how to make eye contact. They don't know how to conduct a business meeting or make a real phone call, right? And they don't know how to conduct themselves in the workplace setting and using emojis, in email communication, right? Not showing up on time, being on their phone all the time. These types of things, I think the next generation is really lacking in, and we need to pay attention to. So let's talk also about investing in Gen X. Who gave the applause for Gen X over there? We never talk about Gen X. We often talk about millennials because there's so many of them. We talk about many baby boomers, and when so many baby boomers retire in the next 5-10 years, what's going to happen to the workforce? We never talk about Gen X. These are, again, folks born about 1965 to 1980. These are folks actually in many situations doing the real work in many workplaces and tasked with the brutal role of usually managing millennials. Let's talk about creating professional development opportunities for these folks. Let's make diversity a reality, not just a priority. This study also found that those employees who were working for diverse companies were more likely to stay longer than 5 years, 70% to 30% of the time. So again, investing in diversity is a payoff that makes sense, right? So especially for the next generation, Gen Z, this is the most diverse generation in history, they're expecting the workplace to also be as such, right? Across age, across gender, across ethnicity, background. So people that perceive their leadership to be diverse, they're more likely to stay longer. Google did a fascinating study a couple years ago where they were trying to figure out what was the perfect team at Google, right? They have access to some of the smartest people in the world, brilliant talent from everywhere. Like, okay, if we pick the smart, this engineer from MIT, this person from India, this person from Brazil, this person from Germany, this person from Texas, whatever, we'll mix them all together, that's the perfect team. They actually found that the perfect team had nothing to do with the people's background, where they went to school, how smart they were, their skills, and everything to do with what was present in the room when they got together, right? That all that really mattered was the culture of what was present in the room. And the single biggest factor in determining a successful and productive team, psychological safety. That team members felt safe to take risks and be vulnerable in front of each other. Right? And the cool thing about this slide is that doing all of these things is $0. I'm not saying it's easy or can be done with the snap of the fingers, but the cost of these, right? Super hard to achieve. But it's not like we have to hire the smartest people. We have to create that space. Not easy to do, but it's so possible. It's at our fingertips. That team members are able to feel safe, take risks, and be vulnerable in front of each other. Show up as who they really are. Be able to give honest feedback with a supervisor. Right? Be able to say, hey, I think we should, have we thought about this, right? Can we try something new, right? Or I really want to be working on this new thing. I'm not going to say that's going to happen, but that's something that I want to do. Dependability, structure and clarity, of course, meaning and impact. Team members think that their work matters and creates change. Again, coming back to the purpose piece. So one of the best ways, I think, to create intergenerational collaboration in this new multi-generational workplace is to create co-leadership opportunities. What do I mean by co-leadership? Pairing someone who's early talent with someone that has a lot more experience at their job, right? So pairing someone who's maybe in their mid-late 20s, someone really hungry, showing up, doing a great job, that has a lot of potential, but doesn't really know that much yet. Pairing that person with someone that has 10, 15, 20 years of industry experience to co-lead a project that's of paramount value to the organization. Not like a barbecue or a lunch and learn or some random little thing like that. I mean to really lead a project that matters. A new rollout, a new policy, a new initiative, something this is a big deal, right? Because then what's happening is that you're going to have that young person sitting there across from someone that has 20 years more of experience than them, kind of being like, huh, I don't really know what I'm talking about. I got a lot to learn. Yeah, you do have a lot to learn, right? And you're going to get that person that has a lot more experience saying, huh, I kind of thought these millennials were full of crap and didn't really know what they're doing, but this young person has a lot of really good ideas and is really thinking about the world in a completely different way than I do. I better listen because this is the future. This is the future of our employees, our members, our customers, our clients, everyone we're working with. This is where we're going. I better understand what this person is thinking and how they're thinking, right? So you're going to get that synergy, that symbiosis, that kind of interesting pool of people coming together. That's where it's at, co-leadership. So how can we harness the wisdom of baby boomers while also giving early talent a platform? The metaphor I like to use, it's kind of like a seesaw, right? If you tip the seesaw too far in the direction of millennials, right, it's no good. Oh, let's put beer and kombucha on tap and have ping pong balls and ball pits and whatever, and you can do yoga 17 times a day, whatever you want. Yay, millennials. No, that's not what I'm saying, right? Let's balance it out. And if you go the other direction, until you spend 10 years here, you really don't have anything to say, so you should just be quiet. Also, no, right? So let's figure out a way where we can balance that seesaw, where we're actually seeing early talent, giving them a platform to share their ideas, to try new things, to become leaders, to invest in their career growth, while also harnessing the wisdom of people that have much more experience and much more insight on the work. So how can we change millennial etiquette while also giving young employees a voice? Again, the seesaw, right? We need to establish clear workplace expectations, right? For this is how you do your job, this is what we expect of you, but we also, if you show up, we want to give you a voice, we care about you, we see you, we're excited you're here, you represent this organization's future. We're going to invest in you. So I think a lot of the millennial etiquette things that come up when I'm working with clients are pretty basic things, right? Showing up on time. Just because you want to come in at 11 in the morning doesn't mean that's when the workday starts. Here we start at 8, or here we start at 9, whatever it is. That's the expectation, right? Using proper language in email and verbal communication, not LOL or OMG or emojis or whatever that is. That's just not how we do things, right? Not necessarily using your phone all the time if you're not using it for work. Yeah, I know you like Instagram and Snapchat. This is work. You can do that on your own time. Not asking for a promotion on your third day, right? Respecting your managers and elders. Be humble, patient, and team-oriented. I think that second word there is so important. We talk a lot about passion and purpose, right, when it comes to the next generation. Let's talk more about patience, right? It takes time to do great things. It takes time to create change in an organization. It takes time to figure out who you are and what you want, right? A lot of young people are so used to everything at their fingertips, right? They got their phone out, and with 2 presses of a button, I can get an Uber, I can get a car, I get a hotel, I can get Uber Eats, I can get food delivered, I can get a date, Bumble, whatever, right? And then they get to the workplace, and it's like, hey, I can't just swipe right to get a promotion. It's like, no, you can't. I can't just swipe right to change things at this organization. No, you can't. You can't just swipe right to figure out who you are and what you want in the world. You can't swipe right for career fulfillment. It takes time, right? Patience, really, really coaching people around patience is important, but showing them that if you add value, right? If you show up and do a good job, if you work hard, if you're a team player, yes, we can talk about some of the things you're talking about, right? No, you're not getting promoted. It's your second week, but do these things and we'll talk about it at this later time, right? Or you want to have more opportunities for leadership, for growth? Cool. Here are the things that I need you to work on, and here are the things that I want you to focus on and get better at, right? But if you add value, we're gonna see you, we're gonna meet you there, right? It's a two-way street. So let's talk about reimagining the senior staff meeting. I think this is a great analogy. I used to work at the Peace Corps in federal government. I think this is kind of how it usually goes in government and sometimes in the corporate world as well. But you know, if you go to a senior staff meeting, you have the senior staff around the table in the boardroom, right? You have the director at the head of the table and then all the department heads around the table. And all the people that work for them, the key people, are way like back here, like 5 feet away at the wall, right? We're all at chairs around the edge of the room. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that. That's how it was at where I worked, at the agency I worked at. Now, of course, the director asks someone at the table for an important figure or a data point or policy, or they have a question. The person at the table doesn't know the answer, of course, so they turn to the person, their assistant, that was me, in the back of the room, right? And the people that are in the back of the room, they know what they're doing. They always have they're on it. They figure it out. They hand the piece of paper. They tell their supervisor the right answer. The metaphor I'd like to leave with you is that let's bring those people to the main table, right? Let's bring them to the table. That doesn't mean that they're going to have the final say or decide who gets a raise or who gets fired or hired or change everything. Nope, but they have a seat at the table. They have a voice. They feel like they're seen and heard. They feel like they're really being consulted. They feel like they matter. I think that's huge right there. Let's take employee wellness seriously. I don't know how many of you have been following, but burnout is on the rise, right? Among all generations. 30% of millennials say that they are always burned out at work, right? Increasingly, people are bringing the stress of the outside world to their workplace. But if you can't show up having good sleep, if you don't show up in a good mental health situation or emotionally, like how can you do your job? So we have to really make sure that it is now our job, if we're managing people, to make sure that their wellness, that we're taking that seriously, that we're giving them those opportunities for renewal, that if they're burned out, that we're allowing them to take breaks, or that we're really making sure that they're able to show up fully. The average employee now checks 40 websites a day, switching activities 37 times an hour, changing tasks every 2 minutes. This is not just millennials, by the way. This is everyone, right? I'm not sure how it's possible to do anything worthwhile at work when you're changing activities 37 times an hour, right? So this has to shift. We have to create more opportunities for focus and for prioritization and for really doing our jobs. How can we foster in-person connection? There was a big push several years ago to remote work, right? All right, it saves money. We don't have to have anyone at the office, right? People don't like offices anyway. They don't want to commute. They don't want to spend 2 hours in traffic. They want to work in their sweatpants, right? They can spend more time with their family in the morning. They can get home earlier, all this stuff, right? And there is some data that shows that people are happier when they're working from home, which makes sense. No one wants to commute, right? But now there's data coming out that's showing that people are increasingly disconnected at work. They have no friends at work, right? The average American adult only has one real friend. And I think some of that's because we don't even go to work anymore, right? Work means, connecting on Skype or connecting on Slack or messaging someone or, whatever. We've lost that face-to-face connection. Those meetings, the bringing people together to really talk about stuff, to do work together. I think there's always going to be opportunities for some roles. Some people can work from anywhere. That's great. That's going to be efficient for them. It's going to make them happier, and it's better for their role. But sometimes let's remember the value. When we do bring people together, let's make sure it is valuable. Let's make sure we're putting those phones away and actually doing work, and that we're actually learning from each other and connecting both on a professional and personal level. So let's remember that performance management is about the people at work, not just KPIs, not just the key performance indicators, the metrics, the job description, the bullet points, the check boxes that that everyone has to fulfill. It's not just dotting the I's and crossing the T's. At the end of the day, it's about the person and who they are, what their desires are, what they truly want. So there's a lot of ways to do this, but I think we need to move towards much more data-driven performance management and engagement tools. There are a lot of software tools now that allow you to track employee engagement. to send out a weekly survey to see how people are doing, to see whether they feel like their manager sees them. Because you might notice, these 8 people are all pretty disengaged and were for the last 3 months. They're all on the same team. Maybe it's the manager, right? Maybe that supervisor is the one that's the problem. And I can see that on paper. Not just, anecdotally, Sarah's the worst or Mark's the worst. No, I can see it, right? There's data that points to it, and I can see it shifting, right? Real-time feedback and affirmations. A lot of people will complain about millennials kind of always wanting that recognition. It's like, hey, I did a great job, right? It's like, well, it's Tuesday. You just were here. Like, that's your job. Like, go back to work. But if someone does do a good job, if they do knock it out of the park, if they give a good presentation, if they do well on a project, if they step up, give them that recognition, right? Celebrate your people and do it often. People want that recognition, right? They want those kind of notes of saying, yeah, great job. And allowing people to give that kind of constant ongoing feedback is going to make them more excited. Fresh opportunities for top performers so they're always learning and growing and feeling like you're investing in them. Time to give, time to learn service opportunities where they can be either volunteer or learn something that's related to their job and feel more engaged. Let's have more stay interviews, not just exit interviews, right? So traditionally, we've always thought, okay, it's time for your exit interview. It's your last day. It's like, it's my last day. Let me tell you everything that sucks about working here. You know? It's like, well, great. Why didn't you tell me this 6 months ago? Maybe we could have made some changes. Here are the things that would help me want to stay working here. And maybe or not, you're going to look at them and say, hey, I can't do these 3 things, but this other one, yeah, we can talk about that. Or not tomorrow. Can't change it tomorrow, but in a few months, sure. Or we can address it in 3 months. We can address it in 6 months. Really creating the culture where people feel like they're able to have these honest conversations. I want to end with a story that I think kind of gets at really what I'm saying here. That's a little bit about what it means to show up. So I mentioned earlier that I don't drive. I mostly bike. I'm not a great driver. So a few years ago, I was in San Francisco, where I live now, and I was biking home, right? Minding my own business. I was going to get some tacos, going home, just biking along. All of a sudden, this guy bikes alongside me. He says, "My name's Bernat. I'm from Spain." I was like, I don't know who the hell you are. Like, stop talking to me. Biking away. He's like, "My name's Bernat. I'm from Spain. I'm from Barcelona." I was like, who is this person? Stop talking to me. Like, you got to be careful in San Francisco, talking to random people. Keeps biking alongside me. "My name's Bernat. I'm from Spain. I'm from Barcelona. I'm a designer, a user experience, UX, UI designer in Spain. I'm looking for a job here in the Bay Area. There's really no jobs right now in Spain, brutal unemployment." I was like, oh, that's interesting. Barcelona is a beautiful city. My best friend used to live there. I visited once, one of the most beautiful cities in the world. He's like, yeah, it is. What are you working on now? So I tell him I'm writing this book about millennials trying to figure out their lives. They don't know what they're doing. They want meaningful work. They don't know how to get it. I'm trying to write a book for the millennial generation. And he's like, oh, that's cool. Do you have a cover designer yet? I said no. He was like, well, go home. Check out my website. Maybe we can work together. So I go home. I got some tacos first. Go home. Check out this guy Bernat's website. I was like, man, this guy is a really good designer. Like, he was really good. He had done all of some CGI animation on his website. It was like really cool. So I post on Facebook that night. Just met this crazy weirdo Bernat while I was biking home tonight in San Francisco. He hails from Spain. He's looking for a design job here in the Bay Area. If you know of anything, let him know. About 5 minutes later, my buddy Yi comments on the Facebook post. He's like, oh, Bernat should talk with my friend Mark. They're doing this mobile startup in Palo Alto. There's like 5 of them. They don't really know what they're doing. They don't have a lead designer yet. Maybe they can work together. So 2 weeks later, Bernat meets with the team. He gets hired to be the lead designer for this tiny startup in Palo Alto. He gets a work visa to stay in the United States, which is a very big deal. It's brutal unemployment where he is from. He sends me a note saying thanks. And like 2 years go by, I don't hear from the guy. And then all of a sudden, I get a text message out of the blue from Bernat. "Smiley, I'm taking you out to dinner anywhere you want to go." I was like, sweet. I'd love to get taken out to dinner. Like, I was writing my book at the time. I was broke. I was like, yeah, let's do this. So we go to this nice restaurant. We get a bottle of wine. I'm like, Bernat, like, what's the deal? Like, what's going on? Like, you don't have to take me out to dinner. Turns out that the mobile startup he had been working for had just been acquired by Yahoo for $80 million. He's the 5th employee at the company. He was paid in equity. He could definitely afford to take me out to dinner. And he said to me, he's like, Smiley, like, thank you. Like, this wouldn't have happened if not for you. And I said to Bernat, nah, man, thank you, right? Because this guy talked to a random stranger in a city he didn't live in a country he wasn't from, on a bicycle. Like, who the hell does that? Right? So I think what I'm getting at here is how can we create a culture in our teams, at our organizational level, where people feel like they are able to channel that inner Bernat, where they're able to show up as their true authentic self, where they're able to make those asks. And sometimes those asks are a little bit bold and ridiculous and out there, and we're not going to be able to say yes to all of them or sometimes any of them, but people feel like they can show up. And every now and then we can say, yeah, we can work on that, or together we can think about that, right? Creating that culture where people feel seen and heard. That's what this is about. So I truly believe that we are not the me, me, me generation. And I don't just mean millennials. I mean all of us in this room. We are not the me, me, me generation. We're the purpose generation. And I believe that we'll be engaged with our work because we have to be. I think the challenges facing our generation, our children's generation, are simply too serious to ignore, too serious to only worry about after 5 o'clock or at happy hour on the weekends. So we can't be stuck in some quarter-life crisis, third-life crisis, midlife crisis, end-of-life crisis, because I truly believe that the stakes are too high. Thank you all so much for listening today. Please feel free to add me on LinkedIn or to reach out and to connect. I'll hang out here if you have any questions. And thanks again. Great to be here.